morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today we'll be presenting the ArkBird project and its conceptual design on the Phoenix space vehicle. My name is Felipe Cuevas.
I'm Miguel Nangsalon.
I'm Sudati Denko.
And I'm Francisco Valdez.
And we are Shattered Skies. So to start off, a quick overview of what we'll be presenting, the problem definition, which we pose our concept for, identifying the need. We'll be going over the requirements analysis, the functional analysis, and we'll be taking a look at the system architecture. So human space exploration has been limited to low Earth orbit for about a half century now. Currently, there's no existing vehicle that has the capabilities of transporting a crew and or a payload to other celestial bodies and orbiting them, descending and landing, then returning the crew and or payload safely back to Earth. So the need is a space vehicle with integrated modular design that will be launched as an upper stage of a heavy launch vehicle. And it will also be, so the integrated modular design comes from the ability to interface with other spacecraft adapters, such as a booster assist module, or a payload bay module, or even a refueling tanker module. We will be utilizing the lunar platform to develop and further develop the technology and resources for colonizing and exploring celestial bodies. So next I will pass it over to Miguel, who will be going over the requirement analysis.
All right, so now we define the need for this, this mission. We produced some baseline requirements for our spacecraft. One being that the spacecraft has to be on board a heavy launch vehicle, for example, the Falcon Heavy, or space launch vehicle. Once we're in space, we need to be able to insert into low Earth orbit and perform orbital maneuvers for rendezvous with our modular additions, as well as dock with other spacecrafts like the International Space Station. This spacecraft is interplanetary, so we need to be able to enter through the orbit of celestial bodies, as well as descent, land, and launch from that body itself. This picture of the DeLorean, it says where we're going, we don't need roads. By roads, we mean airstrips in Earth. So to be able to return back to Earth, we need to withstand the forces and anomalies from that consist of Earth that is in Earth's re-entry, and we do this by retropropulsive landing. So, you know, we're essentially removing airstrips, and hopefully we're able to land like Iron Man. Okay. There's three means of maintenance and support in the spacecraft. It includes in-orbit resupplying, so it replenishes all of our consumables, as well as operational maintenance, so in-flight maintenance, as well as ground maintenance to repair our spacecraft and do make repairs for further missions.
Now we would go over the technical approach. For the technical approach, let's go over the Phoenix Space Vehicle's mission profile. So the mission profile would consist of a launch vehicle putting the spacecraft on low Earth orbit, which would then use its run. Then we would have two other launches for two booster assist modules for BAM1 and BAM2. The space vehicle would rendezvous with BAM1 and conduct a low Earth orbit to low lunar orbit orbit maneuver, and then circularize low lunar orbit, descend and land, and launch from the moon and return from low lunar orbit to low Earth orbit, rendezvous with BAM2 to circularize the low Earth orbit, then deorbit, descend, and retropropulsively land on Earth.
Sorry, just one quick question. So we have the Phoenix space vehicle, and then I'm a little confused on how, what is the booster assist module? This is an add-on to the Phoenix space
Yes,
vehicle?
booster assist modules are separate modules. We would provide the delta V to transfer from one orbit to the next. So they would have the fuel and the propulsion system. I go over it in a second.
Okay.
So this is the base system architecture. This is the Phoenix space vehicle and its major subsystems. You have structure, power, propulsion, telecommunication, and thermal protection. And now we go over the subsystems function definitions. First, let's look at orbital mechanics, because orbital mechanics define majority of this space vehicle's mass. We would start from a 400-kilometer low Earth orbit, home and transfer to the moon, and return using boosters, travel and return using booster assist modules. And these orbital maneuvers will define our masses. So the spacecraft would have a dry mass of 25,000 kilograms, BAM-1 would have a dry mass of 3,000 kilograms, BAM-2 would have a dry mass of 10,000 kilograms. I can see an image of what a BAM kind of looks like. Let's go over propulsion. Propulsion subsystem is one of the important subsystems because it provides power to all the orbit maneuvers. The Phoenix space vehicle would have liquid rocket engines. The BAM-1 and BAM-2 would also support liquid fuel rocket engines. The Phoenix space vehicle would also have retropropulsive landing capability, so a retropropulsive system for descent, land, and launch from low gravity planets and celestial bodies such as the moon. And it would also support a reaction control system to fine-tune its orbital maneuvers. The Phoenix space vehicle main engine would support a 330-second specific impulse engine, while the booster modules would support a 550-second specific impulse engines, and the retropropulsive systems would support 230-second specific impulse high thrust, such as the Super Draco's by SpaceX. And the reaction control system would consist of 16 directional 220 Newton thrusters. Now these, all of these propulsion components would be manufactured by other companies, so we would be getting tried and tested propulsion components. These, all of them would have their own fuel tanks. For example, the reaction control would have a smaller fuel tank, while there would be a main fuel tank for all the main engines. All of these components would be attached to the main structure, which Francisco.
So next up is the structure subsystem. So pretty much what's going to determine a structure is, like Sudati said, is fuel tanks, things like the laboratory that we plan to have in the spacecraft to take to the moon in order to conduct, to see how the humans react to the lunar environment and space environment, as well as the crew cabin and the modular interface adapter, pretty much how the spacecraft is going to rendezvous and connect with the booster assist module. We plan to use aluminum skin as well as a variety of composite materials in order to reduce the weight, and these materials are low weight as well as strong enough to withstand the rigors of launch and re-entry. So, as mentioned before, we plan to use a heavy launch system where we will use a halo attached fitting, which we will sit on top of the rocket. We're not planning on using a fairing because the spacecraft is going to be large enough, and the fairing this provides an issue. So the spacecraft must be able to withstand the aerodynamic forces and issues with takeoff due to the subsonic speeds. So if the spacecraft is designed to come in and re-enter to Earth's atmosphere, then it should be able to withstand those forces during takeoff. Now, the structure geometry will be revolving around three things. So it's in the blunt nose, similar to what you see on the space shuttle, as well as lifting body and delta wing. So the blunt nose pretty much dissipates that heat, creates a larger area, and it enables the spacecraft to return and kind of distribute that heat throughout the nose. as well as a lifting body similar to what you've seen on experimental aircraft in the 1960s. Pretty much this lifting body is able to keep a sleek shape as well as create enough lifting surfaces to allow the spacecraft to glide. And a delta wing, which allows the, in conjunction with the blunt nose, to allow the spacecraft to sit within inside the supersonic Mach cone. Now, the next subsystem is our thermal protection. So obviously, re-entering Earth is not an easy task. So we plan on using, similar to what you've seen on the space shuttle, the high temperature, low temperature surface insulation, as well as reinforced carbon-carbon. Here we have one of those piles that you've seen on the space shuttle, as well as the nose portion, the reinforced carbon-carbon that you can find in the high temperature areas such as the nose, as well as the leading edges. Now, why use the tiles? So they're reusable, they're lightweight, low density, and they are capable of withstanding the high temperatures, about 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And like I mentioned before, this is the RCC with the leading edges where they experience a lot of the heat during the winter. Next up is the power subsystem. How are we going to power the electronics on the spacecraft? We plan on using a variety of fuel cells. Fuel cells are powered by the hydrogen and oxygen, which react to produce the electric energy, and byproducts of that reaction are water and heat. So we can use that water, potable water, for the spacecraft and for the astronauts, as well as the heat in order to maintain the great temperature within the cabin. Furthermore,
quick question. So where did you get the idea to onboard fuel cells?
Space shuttle use them. They use the 3 fuel cells, the same hydrogen and oxygen combination.
Cool. Okay.
Not only will it be powered by the fuel cells, but also solar arrays, so we can't solely depend on the fuel cells. So this spacecraft is intended to land on a surface. So if we do not have the fuel cells run out, we need to rely on something else. Here is where solar arrays come into play. Solar arrays would use sun's energy to power, and while on the lunar surface, we'd be able to charge batteries, and while we have period of darkness, we can utilize the power then our fuel cells in those instances.
Communication is very important in a spacecraft. So for main purposes of communication is, one, to collect engineering data. That's why we have a spacecraft. It's why we send a spacecraft over certain distances to collect our information on environments, pictures, audio, any frequencies that we might collect. Second is to allow for audio and video communications among the crew inside the spacecraft, as well as provide the spacecraft with commands from Earth. Since the spacecraft doesn't really, control itself, we need to aid it and control it from the ground, as well as provide telemetry of the spacecraft to make sure that the spacecraft is doing fine, show its vitals. So with this communication, the distance that we're planning to do, we need to utilize deep space network. This deep space network consists of 3 70mm subnet antennas. These antennas are 120 degrees spaced out. So during the missions, anytime during the missions, almost 100%, maybe not as much, maybe 99% connection at all times during the space mission. Be connected to at least one. These locations are Madrid, Spain, Goldstone, California, and Canberra, New Zealand. And these 3 consist of the deep space network, but we also need to consider where are we launched from. We're also going to be communicating from that. So communications consists of a transmitter to transmit the signal, as well as a receiver, and everything in between. That everything in between is transmitters, transponders, power amplifiers to be able to excite and strengthen the signal that is radiated through each antenna, and the antennas themselves. These antennas consist of directional antennas and omnidirectional antennas. Okay, so the frequencies for space travel and space exploration, we need to be looking at frequencies like the K bands, the L bands, the X bands, and the S bands, each with their own function. For example, the K bands, The K-bands are used when it comes to rendezvousing. We need to be very precise and consist of a higher bandwidth. And L-bands to be able to communicate with satellites. We want this spacecraft to be a well-rounded spacecraft, so communicating with other satellites would be key to our mission. The geometry of the antenna itself, it requires a lot. We're looking at cones and parabolas. Parabolas are great for narrow beams. We need to account for losses. So by losses, we look at data handling. We need to have a simplistic binary code to prevent miscommunications, as well as noise reduction. The Doppler effect we need to look forward to also, because the signal that's transmitted will not necessarily be the signal received due to the Doppler effect.
All right, now we look at the functional analysis. As I talked before about the orbital maneuvers, these are our 8 main maneuvers and their delta V. These define our mass which we would use going into preliminary design to conduct our mass allocation requirements.
All right, so continuing on with our functional analysis, here's our mass allocation summary. So based on the Phoenix space vehicle's launch capacity of 50, the maximum being 50,000 kilograms, we gave ourselves a little bit of cushion. The Falcon Heavy actually has capacity of 54,000 kilograms to low Earth orbit. And so that's where we started. We took account for all of our total delta V's to calculate our propellant needed. So we're at 19,793 kilograms, and leading us to a maximum spacecraft dry mass budget of 25,377 kilograms. That led us to allocating the subsystem components and its weight. So as you see there in the table to the right, this is all based on mass contingency rates on a reference a spacecraft designed by Charles Brown. And this will lead us to our preliminary design, and of course, further analyze and evaluate our trait studies that we have ongoing. And here are references for all the cool images we have. Some of the sketches were done by ours truly, Sadati, right here. And here's just a quick review. Have any questions? Right there.
What was the advantage of not having to take a runway landing? Why was that an advantage?
You can land anywhere.
Yeah, but you can land anywhere on the runway.
Yeah, without the need of a runway.
The reason that the space shuttle is a problem because it needs a specific kind of runway. Because it's so heavy, you need a really long runway. By eliminating the runway, you can land any location that you want, anywhere on the world, instead of being restricted to land in Florida or in California.
Do you guys have a mission in mind for your spacecraft? Or is it just kind of like a general whatever the customer needs?
First mission is to the moon. We would like to be able to perform the orbital maneuvers that we went over, such as the rendezvous with the International Space Station. That's very critical for, like we said, resupplying purposes. Another thing would be rendezvousing with our assist modules, so the booster assist module. That's going to be a capability that's going to really help take the leap towards farther bodies and stuff. One of the challenges is definitely your energy required, right, in any space travel, and it comes down to the delta V's. So with that, it's the propellant that you have. So the onboard propellant you have, that's where you're limited. So the idea of a booster assist module would be to do the main delta V's required for the major trajectories, and then once you're in the maybe sphere of influence of a celestial body, then you can use the main engines of the Phoenix space vehicle. Any other questions?
Roads? Oh, no, we don't need roads.